I know some of you guys have done ETAP with me before, or with John, or...
That means stop, Al. That's what that means.
So just wanted to run through it with, you have some new guys I know who are here, and we just wanted to run through it one more time. I know it's a little bit of a complicated process. So when we first start to do ETAP, again, you're looking, the biggest thing is to, not lose your trash.
Right.
Step in. But really it's what's your kind of questions are you trying to ask, right? So that's how I always try to approach ETAP is if you start to get really down deep into it, you can find yourself in the third dimension of trash collection, and nobody needs to hang out there for too long. And so
I would really like one.
Okay. So really to start now, what kind of questions are we asking, right? So ETAP is all about building that trash profile, right? So at your site, what kind of trash do we have, and is there a way that we can use that to then backtrack and try to solve that problem? So step one in ETAP is we're going to sort it into its likes items. So if you want to go ahead back to doing what you were doing.
I can see it.
Yeah, please
put
do.
it back. All right.
What people really worry about.
If you want to help, jump in, Kelly. We're just going to start organizing them by...
Yep, so by its like items is basically that first step. So we're going to put all of the cups together, we're going to put all of our drinking bottles and our Gatorade bottles together, all that kind of stuff, your food, your styrofoam.
I can't believe that there's a medical bag in there. What people invariably know when they get slow down this is because they found this one weird item. They're trying to figure out. Where's it go? Driving awareness and policy with, a Barbie doll head. It's okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's too cool. That happened to me yesterday. I was trying to figure out if it was a shower curtain or a piece of plastic, and then I go, does it really matter?
Household
Yeah,
next.
exactly.
Gone.
Next. Yep.
Hey, Paul, you're doing the training.
Right, can we use a bucket for your curtain? I don't want the styrofoam.
I just went, we'll chase it out.
Yeah. Let's get back to your...
I'll catch it all.
Right, yeah, Jennifer's close range.
Styrofoam cups or...
Yeah,
Spread
cups
out a
and
little
lids,
bit,
yeah, you can go off the turf. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I just wanted to have it for just...
If you don't have a tarp, then we usually do it on the grass, so just it doesn't leave a mess.
John, you want to tell them about green bottles?
Oh yeah. So don't trust what's in the bottle. There's two things you don't want to open. Like it's been out in the sun for 6 months. Truckers like to use them to go to the bathroom in, and people with dipping addiction. So if it's yellow, we just trash it. We don't know. Otherwise, we drain everything.
We don't normally drain everything because we have a fullness issue.
Alright, yeah. So if it's looking clean and it's water, we don't want it skewing our weights, but a bottle or two is not a big deal. Getting in there too, we got a few tricks how to open them without touching them.
Just don't apply too much pressure.
Exactly.
I learned that out the hard way.
So when we finish the ETAP, then we'll actually do a weight on trash and a weight on recycling. You can already tell this stuff is kind of mid-grade. Nelly will go through some of that too, but this is pretty recent.
Yeah, I can tell you, I only see two things
Right here.
that I could recycle in Manatee.
Well,
So
and that's also the conversation we had. Do we actually...
what we do is, so what we've done is we're in the same boat everywhere,
Food wrappers?
but we will talk to the MRF
Those are chip bags.
and find out where.
He's the president of my organization's board, and he's the one who told me how to do it.
Well, I mean, he's selling his number ones to Indorama, is who's buying their number ones, and they say they can take it. So if they have interest, in trying a little bit
That's
more.
different. So that's a pouch, right?
If he
I'm
has
standing
some
on all the
time,
wrappers.
I'm
Okay.
happy
Yeah,
to
so
try
that's its
and
own
get you in.
category.
Tomorrow, I'll call him.
Put that
I
there.
didn't think about it.
We were in this in every
Yep, that gets its own
situation.
category.
We haul it around in our recycle bags, and most of the gunk falls off of it.
So, and I think it also has
Yes,
to be
ma'am.
adapted
Dries in our
for
bags
the
are porous.
Yep.
Then, because our location, we've even talked to our recycling facility, our solid waste facility recently, and they said just cut out the recyclable side of it. The actual taking it too. I mean, we can still separate and identify what's recyclable.
No, we
but-
only count what actually goes to recycling. Save it, we'll haul it back because we got everything we're seeing. It's easy to get to know sometimes, and it's not that big a deal. This is not that much material, and so it might be something that we don't even worry about for a couple of months. But I do think it's something because Indorama is buying all of the number one plastics right now, and so I've been to their plant. and they said we can take it. Don't send us a hot shot of it. Don't bring in a 18-wheeler of this material, but co-blended with some of it. They're fine in the Rama, but it's people are contaminating recycling so bad. It's really hard on the MRF. It's just easy for them to say don't, because then people just want to push it. So it's all good. I mean, it's not a big deal, but we only count what physically is recycled, not what we hope to recycle, but what we actually.
And I think that's important. Sorry, I'm struggling. I think that's really important because people, when they see, oh well, most of it was recyclables, they think that it's not that big of a deal because it's all getting recycled. Whereas really, that's not the case. It's all just going to a landfill. So I think it's really important to accurately record what is actually being recycled.
As we get rolling here, we may be able to find that one group that's saying we understand it, and that's where we save it a little bit and we bring it to them, you know, but it's not. And we're recycling almost 80% in Birmingham because we have somebody that's actually making diesel fuel out of them. They don't care how to make it. They'll take any plastic. So it's an amazing amount being recycled there.
And I would hope that technology catches up everywhere else as well.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they're working with Sunoco, and their product can go right back into diesel fuel.
So your top back to ETAP real quick. So your next step, so we see we've got all these like piles going on. So your next step is gonna, if everybody's got the ETAP sheet in front of them, you're gonna start really just at the top and roll your way down through the categories. So ETAP's got 3 phases in it. You've got your first sort, and then your second sort is gonna be by subcategory. So what I mean by subcategory, so it's paper and then bags. So if you had paper bags, you would go to that section, and then within that section you would determine which ones are intact, partially intact, and then degraded. And you get to write a number in all of that. And then your final step, or vice versa, depending on how you want to do it, as you work with people and you get with your crews and everything like that, you'll figure out the best way to do it. I swear our crew mobile, they telecommunicate at this point. I don't even think they talk to each other to do ETAP. That final category is going to be your branding. A big thing with branding is to only write down what's actually branded. As you start to stare at trash, you're going to start to be like, I know for a fact that is a Dasani water bottle. But if it's not branded at any point, it's unfair towards your data to say that it's a Dasani water bottle, because that's an assumption that you're making. So really make sure you're doing stuff based off of labeling and not just again, we all know what stuff looks like after a while. I can tell you what a McDonald's straw looks like, but it's not branded, so we try not to include it. So I think we're gonna start with just right at the top.
So big picture, before you do the first thing, you can look at this and what are our issues?
Somebody's missing a shoe.
Exactly.
Jimmy Buffett's looking for the other. Is
Big goals from
Plastics.
plastics, but you're looking at a bunch of to-go cups. So there's a lot of communities going to ditch the disposables, and they're trying to find better options. So that is probably the biggest percentage pile I've ever seen of throwaway cups. However, it could be an anomaly. We're going to do this every time here. It may not look like this next time. So but you start building that, and if you see those bags, we probably got kids after school. Guess what we're in?
We've got 4 schools right
There you
on
go. And so those are the deals. And that's a relative, what's missing in this batch is the styrofoam. But I can see it in some of these. And it could be just an anomaly of being here next time we come. So that, again, none of this is acute. We're building a chronic discussion, long-term profile. But that's a weird data set that we don't usually see.
Which, just to build off of what you just said for the people who weren't with the last training, when we do a clean out of this device or a clean out of the surrounding area, it's only 1 bag we're assessing.
Yeah, so we do a 10%. So say, you know what I mean? So it makes it easy. It's 1 bag per 10 bags. And if you don't make it up to that 10, it's still just that 1 bag.
If you clean the litter getter out and it's a bag and a half, just do the whole
thing.
But we didn't tell our guys that. We had a site with 1 litter getter and it was over 300 pounds of floatable.
Yeah.
It was like 9 bags, and
6
they didn't
days
get the
later.
memo,
No.
and they ETAP
All of it.
300 pounds of.
Okay, that actually was my next thing. Is we then take this and send it to you guys?
Yeah, so we need to have a whole conversation about that. Let's go through the form and
Okay,
all of that
that's fine.
first, and then we'll get into the what happens next phase.
Okay.
So what do we got? We got any paper?
I didn't see any.
I don't think so either. Is that?
It was questionable.
That one missing.
No, that
No,
wasn't.
I think this Burger King. I'm just gonna keep standing on this pile. I think that Burger
that's
King cup.
That cup and that lid are
Yeah,
separate.
that's paper.
Yep. So we got one. So it's, now that you've identified that 1 cup, right? So looking at it, it's really soggy, kind of gross. Paper is an interesting thing because as you collect stuff out of the water, you're really not gonna find that much paper because it's gonna degrade much faster than the rest of this stuff. So you're really not going to get paper in its like full-on degraded state because it just won't be there anymore. So most of the time when you find paper, it's going to be in that partially intact, or it's going to be intact because somebody literally just threw it out 10 minutes before you showed up. So I'm going to go 1 partially degraded paper cup, and it's Burger King, right?
Yep, Burger King.
So you see how we're marking them.
I am almost sure it's Burger King now.
Right?
Yes, it's
Burger King. All right, any glass?
I think they're.
Is that one glass?
No.
No, yeah, I think those were all plastic. Yep. Sweet, no glass. Mini metal.
Now, are you going to normally find glass in that since it doesn't float unless it's capped?
Yeah, so it just depends on your, where you're picking up trash. Sides of roads, like things that drain sides of roads, we seem to find a lot more glass in that kind of
Oh, I
area.
get that. I'm talking about this device.
Yeah, you'll still get some in there.
You get a wisp of air in it, it'll float for a while. So we do get, sometimes like you said, it's capped.
Yep.
Snapple.
We'll get some.
Snapples, lots of snapples back when they were
Hey,
still
a
glass.
lot of times too, that you're gonna see an energy drop, just like that boom was at the mouth. And so even that, it's gonna knock the sediment out, and so you may have glass sunk right there. It's not gonna be a lot, but we'll pick that up too. Some aluminum cans actually sink, but you're gonna see an energy drop at the mouth of the trap or boom. We jump in that.
So no glass, no metal. Then we move into our plastic section. That plastic section is always going to be your hardest hitter. We are looking at separating out styrofoam into its own little categories, and if we do end up doing that, I'll send you guys all the updated forms, just because it deserves its own. It's a, it is part of the plastic family, but it absolutely deserves its own
That one
recognition.
don't have it on?
We're still on the old ones. Having styrofoam be its own major category. So starting it just again, I just like to run down top to bottom. It makes it the easiest. You don't end up skipping anything, and then you're like, oh crap, I forgot that one thing. Let me go back. So I always recommend just top to bottom. So beverage bottles and containers. This is going to be everything that's not a water bottle. So that does have its separate category. So let's start with these guys. The other thing to remember too when you're doing ETAP, there's a difference between something being dirty and something being degraded. And so just because it's dirty necessarily, like so this Gatorade water bottle, for example, still has its labeling on it, still pretty intact, still has all of its coloring, but obviously it's dirty. That doesn't mean it's been degraded. It just means it's been in something nasty or gross, or It was all this stuff was from that side portion. It seems to collect a whole lot of that little microorganics. So just keep that in mind too when you start to go into that partially intact and then degraded section. It's just because if it's dirty does not mean that it's degraded. So when you start to get a lot of items like this, I like to make 3 categories. I like to do the intact, partially intact, and then your degraded. So if you'll do that for me real quick.
Would you consider that little drink
This one?
box one ahead of it?
This one?
Yeah, would you consider that degraded?
Yes, I would. So that's
Okay, yeah.
different. So that has organic growth inside of it. So that's when still like that moss and those barnacles and everything. Especially for you guys, you'll actually start to get stuff with barnacles on it. Where like in Alabama, we don't have barnacles. Don't really hang out in our river systems. And so it's a good thing to catch. If it's growing on it or in it, then you are starting to get into that degraded phase.
You're allowed to go towards
By number?
Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna say, okay, this
Yep.
is 9 bottles?
Yep.
Okay.
It's plastic.
I say I saw the metal lid.
Yeah, the metal lid.
Threw me off.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are regular plastic. What's the first category?
Intact.
Intact.
Awesome.
Intact.
Yep.
Are these partially or
Those are like the degraded.
I would start to go degraded on those. The type of plastic that is a lot thicker, and so you're not going to see that coloration difference as much. But yeah, that's definitely got organic growth inside of it. It's smushed, so it's been out there for a really long time. So, and again, plastic's one of those weird things because it doesn't really necessarily degrade. It just breaks down into smaller portions. So I would go 2 on that.
But yeah.
So then after you do that part, then we go into the labeling. So I'm seeing a Pepsi.
Pepsi. Should I, or we're not going to recycle these?
I
Or
don't.
do we want to set them up that way?
Yeah, so when he's asking a really great question. So when you have your 2 buckets, you got one bucket that's going to end up being your recycling and one bucket that's going to end up being your trash. It just helps you in the long run. So we'll pretend like we'll pretend today.
So we had Pepsi, we had Gatorade. This I may have left your last one. These are a little wide bottle. It is barefoot.
Oh man, the gross stuff.
Gatorade again.
So when you've got more than one, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to write that brand out, and then in parentheses after you're going to want to put 2 or 3 or 4, so that way you're not like writing Gatorade 16 times.
Gotcha. I don't know what that is. Just a
Yep, doesn't worry. Again, we don't write it down. It's still categorized in that count that you did
I almost
earlier.
think I should have probably put that in there too. Look at how much is inside there.
Yeah, but I
Well,
think
although the
that's-
Yeah,
label's
it's
still
still
there.
just dirty. Yeah, and again, that part where I picked it up was just chock full of these little broken down pieces of organic. So
Nothing. This lid has the best stuff on earth.
Oh,
And then this
those two are gonna be your trash. Yeah, I think this could be trash. That's fine. So, all right, next we're gonna go to water bottles.
Oh, that's why I'm here in the NBA.
Right, exactly. So it looks like we got one water bottle.
One whole water bottle.
I would probably go partial on
Yeah,
that.
say 2.
It doesn't have a whole lot of stuff inside of it. It's got no barnacles growing on it. It's not completely brittle. That's the other thing to look for when you're looking at plastics is the longer a plastic has been out in the sun, it gets a lot more brittle. So I'd probably just go partially intact on that guy. That was like an 11. So no branding. Sorry, there's a bug crawling on me. Goodbye. Okay, all right.
in your documentation, so
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing straws and stirrers next.
Oh, I got it. Okay. What happened when I transferred mine? These lines disappeared.
Oh no.
So I've been trying to
We'll
put.
get you a new,
Okay.
we'll get you a new one. Yeah, we'll send everybody the PDF versions of this. Sometimes when you start to over photocopy, they do start to get a little funky. They do not have to be in color. My Charlotte crew texted me the other day and they was like, "We can't find our color copy." I was like, "Totally fine, no big deal." All right, straws and stirrers. I think I see one. Yep. So I would go all intact on those. It's clearly still very much a straw. If you cleaned it, you could probably use it, even though that would be gross. So we got 3.
This is garbage, you said, right?
Yep. All right, bottle caps are your next one. So we got 2 over there. Yeah, so bottle caps is one of those hard ones because you can drive yourself crazy. You know what I mean? So if it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot one, like, it's gonna be okay.
And do we count it if it's already on the bottle?
No, we do not. So if it's attached to the bottle, it belongs to the bottle. Same thing with cup lids. If it's on the cup, it belongs to the cup. Thankfully, cups and cup lids are in the same category for that reason. But yeah, so if it's on it, belongs to the bottle.
Oh wait, here's another one.
So, and those are another thing that are kind of hard to do, intact, partially intact, or degraded, just because they are so small. I'd probably go
Degraded on
all degraded on those. They're kind of smushed, they're kind of gross, all of that. So we're gonna go 3 there. All right, so we got cups and cup lids, which is gonna be our biggest one, it looks like. So plastic cups and cup lids. Let's go ahead and break it down into the 3 categories.
Okay.
The other thing too, as you start to get more fluent in all of this, as one person is breaking down your different groupings, the other person can be writing down your branding.
That would be a lid, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's cups and cup lids. It's
Okay,
all the same
okay.
category. Yep, so we're just gonna do intact, partially intact, or degraded for this one.
That's gonna go degraded.
Yep. So we would, when we go through branding, we can use that because it's got the McDonald's M on it.
Degraded.
I would go degraded on that one. It's got quite a bit of algae growing on it.
There's a bag already full. Take that
Perfect.
one.
Yeah, I'm gonna take 2. I'm gonna take 2 of these bags so that we can practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, please do.
But I'm losing the battle with this.
With the trash bag. Looks like we got some Dunkin' Donuts going on.
That's pretty tough.
Do you guys have a styrofoam? You don't have a styrofoam band or anything, do you guys here?
No.
No? Interesting. Yeah, because this is weird. I was like intentionally trying to find like a large variety
Yeah, I'm
of things
amazed
to
at
go
how-
through, and I was like, I can't find any styrofoam.
That's a big category bias. I find all the food containers
Yep.
all the time.
Yep.
It's degraded.
The other thing too, especially on cups, and we'll talk about it again when we get to styrofoam, if you see a cup that's
I
been
put
split
that
in
in
2, and I call it the make-a-cup rule, so if you can make a cup out of your parts and pieces, go ahead, because in that way you're not going to skew your data dramatically with bits and pieces. Nope, that's a food container.
Oh, there we go.
Throw things at me, why don't
Yeah,
you?
right.
Jeez.
It's full there.
Right? Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start with your intact. Again, this is going to be another hard one just because it is so dirty. So some of these I would go partial on. Like, yeah, go partial on that guy, that one,
Start splitting.
that one. So just because it's splitting, this also, like, a lawnmower might have hit it or it might have gotten run over by a car, you know? So you're going to kind of take some of that into your consideration. But again, I really look, will you step on all that stuff really fast for me? Yeah. Cool, yeah, so I would go intact on those guys.
Intact. This is intact. These are degraded.
Yep.
What do you think?
I'd still stay intact on that guy.
All
The
right.
coloring is super bright still. It hasn't been out in the sun for too terribly long.
This one too.
That one's
just dirty, but the coloring is pretty good.
Yeah, but you've got some algae growing inside of it, so I would go partial on him. So, so what we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like 10 intact on the cups and cup lids. Let's go ahead and pull some of your partials out of that pile. So I would go partial on that one that your driver wishes on. Great.
Hitch all this.
Yeah, so it doesn't fly away on us. Yeah, you did.
Super fast. Okay, now what were we doing?
So pull some of your partials out of there. Yeah, so then I would go partial on those guys. Let's see, that one, so
That's
say
a degraded.
that's a degraded. You're starting to see some of the color distortion on that one, so go partial with the one in your hands. Yep. And I think you're right. I think the rest of those would be degraded. Sweet. So we got 7-Eleven.
Wow.
All right, and then how many degraded over there? We got a Dunkin'.
Yeah. You got a couple Dunkins.
Burger King. Okay, awesome. 2 Dunkin'. Wendy's.
Yep, Wendy's.
The blue one is a 7-Eleven, right?
Mm-hmm. You
Thornton's.
forgot that one.
Thornton's gas station.
Sweet. How many I did not count yet?
Oh, 1, 8.
8, including those.
Oh yeah, 9,
10, 11.
10, 11. Did you already get this?
I did, yes, thank you. Awesome. So yeah, it's going to put all of those in the trash so we don't lose them and have to hunt them down later.
Your stuff.
That's teamwork.
That was fun. There we go. All right, you got all these, right?
Yes, I do, thank you. Yep, so those are all going in the trash.
I was gonna say, or the sport and people do, not sport.
Oh, yeah.
I have a child.
Any questions so far? Making sense to everybody? We doing good? Cool.
And then have we hit any items that are smaller than the fist?
We haven't gotten there yet. Yep, so I do that at the very end once we get down to the nitty gritty of it. So we're going to do chip bags next, which is the ones I was standing on.
Food bags?
Food bags, sorry, thank you. I have a migraine, so my brain is like functioning at like 4%, I swear. So we go ahead and go through these guys next. This is a really good example of some stuff that's going to start to get actually degraded on your chip bags. So like that clearly used to have some color in it, right? So we're going to start, once you start to get this bad, you can't read what it is, we're going to go degraded on stuff like this. Food wrappers are a really hard thing because they've got that aluminum coating in them. They don't really break down. They just get grosser and grosser and start to fall apart and that kind of thing. So really look for your coloring when you're working on your chip bags and your food wrappers. So we'll do degraded on that pile.
Okay.
Gravy train beef flavored snacks. You got some weird stuff over here, you guys.
Dogs.
That's a dog.
Okay, good.
Do you have a category for it?
Great.
Tell those dogs this stuff. It's kind of getting faded out.
Yep. Yeah, so I would go partial on him. You can still read what it is, where these guys are really starting to get. So go partial on that one. Yep. Make a new pile.
I like this one.
Another thing to remember too with chip bags, this came up in my last training. You have to rip a chip, you have to rip a chip bag and a food bag to open it. So just because it's ripped does not mean that it's like degraded or partially degraded. Again, like your functionality of the item. Yep, that looks great. It is important to remember when you're looking at it.
Now that brings me to my question.
Yes, sir.
On here, their food wrapper and chip bags are two separate things.
Yeah.
A lot of what you have there are not chip bags.
Yeah,
but
so
you keep
that's
saying
chip bags right there.
Okay.
Sorry, I
Slip of the tongue.
Slip of the tongue. Yeah,
It's
they're
okay.
also like
It's
right
okay.
next to each
I'm
other. So yes,
Yeah,
thank you. We're
it's
in
my first
food
one,
wrappers.
so I'm just trying to make sure I understand it.
Yep, absolutely. So we decided as a company to pull out chip bags because it does give you that really interesting target point. And a lot, again, your chip bags aren't going to be your full-size chip bags. They're going to be the ones you get at the gas stations and the kids have in their lunch boxes. And there's going to be so many of them. It was a cool thing to be able to pull out from that food wrapper category. So honestly, candy could probably be its own thing too, because that's another thing you're going to find a whole lot of is small candy wrappers. So, alrighty. You get some branding down. Where are we? Gravy train.
There's no. Oh, which one do you got? The first one here?
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
Recess. This one's a Little Debbie's.
Yes,
Go away, please.
Segment. Yep.
Put it on my pork crackers.
So the other thing you'll notice too is like there's not a whole lot of room to write your branding on here. So one thing you can do is you can flip over to the back side and write like food wrappers continued and like continue to write down your branding from there. So, and again, that comes back to what kind of questions are we really trying to look at? You know, are we going to spend all of our time on branding because that's what the grant's asking for, or are we going to get as much as we can and then move on to the next category? Smuckers! Those are the best of the Uncrustables.
Alright, those go wrong with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's start with intact food wrappers. How many you got?
Go ahead.
1, 4. Awesome. Alright. This is your partial pile over here, right?
Correct.
Yep. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
4 and 1.
Yeah, this Reese's is another really good example of something that's clearly been out there for a hot minute. Like half of it's not even orange anymore, and we all know that it should be that bright orange color, right? So let's go ahead and get rid of all this stuff into the trash. ETAP always feels a little funny because like I just take all of this stuff and then I'm gonna dump it on the ground. But it's for science, so it's okay. So we're gonna go to chip bags next. So let's go ahead and split those into their categories. Yeah, so that's intact for sure. All of its coloring still there, all that good stuff. There you go. Yep. So I would go partial on that one. The Doritos is starting to fade. Good job. Yep, intact. Awesome. You're killing it. You got it. Might go intact still. Yep. Put it on standby. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Partially. Hey Joe, I got a question for you. This is probably a solid decision to make as a group. When you guys get into branding, are you looking at, so Chip Bags brings it up and so does beverage bottles and containers. There's two ways of thought of looking at it. You can look at it by major brander, right? It's like everybody knows like Coke, Diet Coke, you know what I mean? So you can either label it just to say Coke and do 12, or you can do Coke, Diet Coke. So as a group, that's probably a really solid decision to make, especially when you get into chip bags too, like Lay's makes the majority of the chip bags we're gonna find, so you want to save yourself some time. But if there's interest, as for the grant, to get that specific message involved when you go to get into that branding function. So it's like, for example, with all of our projects, we've asked us to do that specific. Some of our other projects
You all will be the ones that are ultimately getting that city ready. Especially on upward path. Because I don't want to get. Okay, I mean, you might be able to say, okay, that's a Lay's, or you might be able to make out something from it. And my thought is, this is our first go at.
Yeah.
So this is gonna consume time.
Yeah.
I think if we can basically categorize it by a major brand, we can always come back and bring this.
I would also say major brand because I think the purpose of the grant is that we're collecting data, but we're trying to use this information to connect change. So Diet Coke versus regular Coke is really a big deal because we're going to want to talk to Coca-Cola. You know what I mean? So major brand is most appropriate for the mission of this grant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be like, don't get too, because like Coke owns an absurd amount of things. Like if you don't know who owns it, like go ahead and just write the name of it down. Like it's not going to make or break your data set. As long as you're just consistent across the board and across the three different groups, that's really your biggest one. Because when you want to go back to compare that data, you want to make sure that everybody's just doing it the same way. So for this case, so these are all Lay's. So you brought out a good point. Like that's its own thing. I don't know
Yeah.
what those are. The whole
Shebang.
shebang. Fancy. So we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intact, it looks like. Ooh. And those are all lays. 7, 8 lays, it looks like.
Got them all full.
Yep. Then we're gonna go partial on these guys. So 1, 2, 3. We got the whole shebang. We're not really curious if you guys find one.
I've never heard of it.
Either.
No, it's a medical bag.
Bayou has a bag, yeah, so they can go over there in that category. Yeah, so this can go in the trash if you don't mind.
Good, it's a specimen bag.
So fun.
At least it's empty.
Right, exactly. Alright, so Styrofoam Cups are up next. So let's go ahead and, so that's a food, that goes over here. So again, this is where that make-a-cup rule is going to be really important. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a 7-Eleven a cup and a 7-Eleven cup, but if it's 2 halves of a cup, go ahead and just count it as 1. Again, that's just all about, yep, that goes in that counter, great job. Keeping that data consistent and not having these huge skewed data points because you're counting every single bit and piece. So that's a whole cup, yep. And I just, when I do it, I just stack them on top of each other so that when I go do the count, it's easier. Sometimes you got like 4 pieces and you make a cup.
That's 7/8 of a cup, but I'm gonna round up.
Exactly, 7/8 whole cup, that works. So that's actually gonna go in that category too. So this is again just styrofoam cups, yep. And these are all gonna be, this is also
That's like a food
container, yeah. So I would go partial on pretty much all of these. None of them, when you start to look at like degraded styrofoam, like it's weird, the like little bits, like you know how there's like all those little teeny tiny balls that like make up styrofoam, and degraded styrofoam, it like starts to get a little bit bigger. Definitely isn't white anymore. There's no, you know, structural integrity to it. You like look at it and it falls apart is kind of, you know, how I start to judge that styrofoam. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 partials.
Yeah, it might be a part or degraded.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Of,
And I throw it in.
degraded.
There you go, Al.
Throw it away.
Yeah. He hides it underneath all the other.
So how many cups did you count after that?
So I did 4. Yep.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. There was, I don't remember where I was 2 weeks ago, but it was like 27. I was, oh my gosh. All right, styrofoam pieces. Just kidding. I'm gonna skip that word and come back. Go to other styrofoam fast food items. So when it says other, like other, it basically means like literally anything that's not a cup. So you got your plates, your, what are those things called? Clamshells, your bowls, your ramen instant lunches. You'll be shocked with how many of those you'll find. Popeyes is a whole bunch of different weird things that are styrofoam. And this is really where it starts to get a little bit tricky because this stuff tends to break down, or at least break down is not the right word, come apart into little pieces, more so than the styrofoam cups do. So we kind of, this category kind of like mushes into that pieces category. So again, I stick with that. If I've got 2 chunks of a clamshell, I'm going to try to make 1 clamshell. So then again, we're not skewing our data crazy wide based on all of that. Let's go ahead and do inside personal integrated on those bad boys. Same thing with plates. If you can make a whole plate, you guys can count it. That's a good guy. Yep. Yep, awesome.
We can. Nice. Which one does this? That one, yeah. So this is a really good example of degraded, you guys.
Coloration is completely no longer white. You've got some organics growing on it. Yeah, that's also a good example too. Just really gross, and again, it's so thin at that point, it'd be so easy to break through. Yeah, edges are kind of weird at that point, so that's a really good example. So we're doing one intact here. You can still see what it says. It's really just dirty. Just because it doesn't have its bottom doesn't necessarily mean that it's not intact. So we got one intact, probably going 2 partials on this stuff. And again, that's trying to make that grouping. And then I'm probably not going to do of a cup or a plate or a bowl or a clam shell. That's what I started to call those pieces.
Is there I don't remember. Is there a spot for construction foam?
So there is not. That would probably. There is the write-in section. So if you're starting to see a lot of it, you can just make that your construction and then add another write-in. But again, that goes across consistency. You just want to be sure if you're going to add a category, everybody needs to add a category.
Gotcha.
Yep. So, all right, cool. Styrofoam pieces, I'm really honestly not seeing that many ones that are like, okay, that's definitely a piece. Something to keep in mind on your styrofoam pieces is we use the judgment of your fist, right? So if you can glump a bunch of styrofoam pieces to be about the size of your fist, that's just one. Because if not, you're gonna sit here and be like 512. And so we really just try to make it, and it's kind of like an eyeball, you know, if you've got a whole bunch of them, you're like, that's a fist, that's a fist, that's a fist. Right, and so if they're really if it's smaller than your fist, we don't tend to worry about it too heavily because it's probably broken off of something that you've already counted, or again, this particular grant isn't looking super heavily into that microplastic category anyway, and so it's really not a huge deal, so don't worry about it. You still picked it up, and that's what matters. Alrighty, so other fast food service items, that's going to be your other plastic stuff, like your lids to your Waffle House containers, your fruit cups, your Fruit Loops. So let's see, what do you think is creative on that guy?
This guy?
Just all of it, go for it. Yep, I go first one, then come there. Yep. Partial, absolutely. Perfect, yep, so we got one intact and probably 3 partials. It is technically smaller than your fist, the packet, but if you're starting to see I find 12 of these every single time, that's when it becomes something to know. When it's the one-offs, I wouldn't overly stress about it. Same thing with jam packets. You find some weird stuff like that, but really your biggest one in this category is going to be the Capri Sun or the Kool-Aid. And so these are actually most of the time going to be intact too. I very rarely see them partially or degraded, but the coloration is what they're really going to look like for there. So we got one Capri Sun.
And to that, I would say if you do start seeing a bunch of the Chick-fil-A small little sauce containers or the Taco Bell sauce packets, then make note of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an organization that we can contact and work with in the future. So try and reduce this.
Alrighty. Yep, that's trash. Thank you. So our next category, wrapping it up, we've only got a couple more. So we're going to do other food packaging. I'm not really seeing other than these rings. Those rings fall into our other food packaging, like the rings that you find around Coke bottles. So I'm going to do one intact and one partial on those. Alright, so our bags are going to be our next one. Bags are my least favorite thing to do intact, partially, and degraded on, just because they're really hard, because once they start to get dirty, you're I can't really tell what that is anymore.
Degraded.
Yep, degraded, absolutely. It's green. You know, it's been in the water for a hot minute. So yeah, go ahead, do what you guys think.
Don, where's the specimen? It's a specimen.
I think we saved that.
Okay,
We got a lab.
We got a lab.
We're working with Pfizer on the new vaccine. It's going to be derived from this muck. If you can live through this, you
You can live
can live through anything.
Yep, so I'm not seeing a whole lot of branding on here. If it says thank you, that's not really a brand, that's a style of bag that companies can buy.
Usually a low-end gas station.
Low-end
but
gas stations, yeah.
Cigars.
Okay, that's what
Thank you.
So we got one degraded. And this category is bags and film. So sometimes you'll start to get just like a random piece of plastic film, and so that's where it can go into that category. We got one. Is this your degraded?
Yep.
Awesome. How many partials?
Yes, maybe.
That looks like a good one, yeah.
Maybe this. No, I guess this is the red, right?
Yep.
This one.
Great. One.
Yep.
You got a pretty active winter spot right here, so the stuff ought to
Yep.
be pretty new.
Alright, any hard plastic fragments?
Yes. Did you get all the
I got
bags
them.
already?
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
So the hard fragments you're just gonna lump together,
Yeah, so this is a hard fragment.
like lighters and writing pens.
No, so those are the lighters are gonna go into your cigarette, tobacco, and packaging. Those are very in that other category. Technically, that fork should have gone into other food. Other food packaging, I guess. That's what we don't really find forks. So yeah, two hard fragment pieces. Again, when you start to get into that pieces section, it's really hard to have like an intact piece of something. You know what I mean? Because by nature, it's already partial. So I'm just gonna go two partials on that, and that does have a brand on it. It's part of the nerf something. So we'll go ahead and write that down. Maybe you'll find the other half someday.
That's right. Or in the other shoe.
The only thing the plastic fragments tell us is when we have some household dumping. It's usually kind of weird. You
Again,
know?
that really starts to get into your microplastics too.
Pieces of toys.
One of the heaviest litter days I find is trash day.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you
Flag
find
out.
trash coming out from just it dumping into the truck and the wind catching it. So
Yep.
you know, I wouldn't call that dumping.
But it does tell you where it's coming from. It's different than all styrofoam Chick-fil-A cups.
Right.
So it's a great point that you're making of, you know, hey folks, where's that coming? You know, we tell people bag your trash, even if it's going to trash can.
Right.
And so that's actually the kind of data point specifically that it's
That we
important to
can
hear what you
use,
just
yeah.
said.
Because then we know, all right, we need to target our community members
There you
around
go.
this area.
That could be a neighborhood right here.
Yeah.
Have a category for a square plastic piece.
Information.
Right, yeah, very
It's actually
specifically.
exactly what we're trying to.
Yeah, we're gonna put it in now.
Yeah, so we're getting there. So you run across something and you're like, it's plastic and I don't know where it goes, that's the other category. So that's where you go ahead and put it in there, you
Dang.
can denote what it is.
Small.
We don't really have any other plastics. So next we've got cigarettes, tobacco, and packaging. So that's going to be anything related to smoking of any sorts.
Those plastic tips, man.
The plastic tips
Everywhere.
Swisher Sweets, yeah.
I suspect this will be a hot area for switchers.
Oh yeah, it's easily one of our most picked up items, like hands
I
down.
think for soft drinks and tobacco that we could build a marketing profile and sell it back.
Sell it back
You want to
to
know what
them.
your market share is?
Yeah.
We can tell you what your market share is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Those are pretty much mostly intact. I would go degraded on, or partial on that one, partial on that guy. Again, you're gonna start to look for fading in these. It's the same concept as that food wrapper and put back. That's pretty intact.
Actually, it's a
What the heck? What branding we got, guys?
Woods. Good times, good times.
Great.
Yeah, good times. No, I said good times. That's great. Oh, 3 good times. Oh yeah. On at this point. Yep. You gotta switch. Night owl.
White owl, white owl.
Says night owl.
Oh, it does say night owl. The knockoff of white
No.
owl.
No.
All right, so what's our count? We got a
One.
or intact. Start with intact, please. 6 intact.
6 intact.
Okay.
7 intact.
7 intact. You got any partials in there? Yeah, I didn't really see any. So yeah, the tips
get
are
to
another
these.
one of those. Again, it's one of those that's smaller than your fist kind of thing. If it's something of interest that you guys are looking to document, then by all means, like knock the socks off. You can go ahead and just, most of those are going to be degraded or partials anyway, so I'll probably go 4 partials on those. And I think that is it. The rest of that category, you're gonna start to get into like the shoe. I forgot the shoe. To answer your question, the shoe is gonna go into literally it's textiles and shoes. So any kind of clothing you find is gonna fall into that category. So for this batch, there wasn't a whole lot of that stuff that was left over that you're not really necessarily going to worry about. There wasn't too much of that really, really teeny stuff. But again, if you get down to it and you're like, there are 6 itty bitty teeny tarnies, it's not going to make or break your, you know what I mean, your overall, again, this is much more of a big picture kind of thing. If you're worried about microplastics, absolutely you're going to dive that deep. But for this particular instance, we're really looking at that higher level. What's your branding? What's your big ticket items? So obviously, like, don't leave it there. Please pick it up and take it home with you. But we don't worry too much about getting it down on the ETAP sheet. So.
And then just to confirm, when we go to weigh the trash, we weigh everything, not just what you're doing here.
Correct.
And that's reported.
Yes. Yeah. So I think they're about ready. So we'll do the litter grader, and then we'll come back and I can show you guys how Osprey does the weighing process. But that's exactly the perfect point. We do try to, with the rest of the stuff, we do still try to recycle what's actually going to, separate what is actually going to be recycled versus what is trash for that overall big picture.
And just a reminder, part of the QA process, you're going to double count some sections of that. So you basically just pick a random number, use a random number generator, and it's going to pick, I think, I don't remember exactly, but 3 categories, and you just have somebody double count it, and that's just for QA, QC. So just all of that is in that project plan. I know it's a super long document, but everything that you need to know is in there, and so I highly recommend reading it.
And then just so you know, I've bagged 2 of the
or highlight it.
Awesome. Yeah. So when we do the big weight,
or the separating,
2 pages.
don't separate the
yes.
recyclables out of it.
Yeah. No problem. Not a big deal at all. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna worry too heavily about recycling today per se. But big picture, definitely the things that you guys can recycle within your local merge, like Dawn was saying, super important, which is not a whole lot, unfortunately. Yeah.
If you guys want to take that stuff separately and we have a conversation about that, that's one thing. But with all of our programming, the recyclables coming from here, it'll just ruin it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really important thing to know and to be cognizant of. So, any other ETAP questions? And I know you guys are weighing stuff on different groupings, right? And they're 3 different ways that things are getting weighed and everything like that. So make sure we're following all those things. And the QA should be a separate person, right? Not the same.
Correct.
Not the original person that did the first sort.
Yeah.
So would it almost be better to bring the bag, because it will likely be one person or 2 people going and then getting that bag and taking it back to our facility and going through it versus doing it out on site if you need that quality control check?
Definitely, definitely, because you have to have 2 people to do that.
You can't quality check yourself. Yeah, exactly. And so honestly too, if it was somebody completely, so say you've got 2 people going out, really you should have a 3rd person that wasn't involved, you know what I mean, in that original ETAP at all, because we did it together. Right, you know what I mean? So unless you're you're not going to help me, and then you're going to come be my QA QC, is really how it should be done if you're just doing 2 people.
Yeah.
So. Cool, thanks for help, you guys.
Just real quick then, if we're going to do that, if we take the bag, like Stephanie said, we're going to take that bag and sort that, we're still going to have to weigh our total trash, correct? Everything else is still
Wait
left
that
behind.
day. And then if you're not doing the ETAP on site, because you weighed and collected it, or Kelly weighed and collected it, then that will come back, and then multiple people will be a part of the process of assessing it versus just doing it and then not having that quality control.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are weighing it out by major category or subcategory?
Can you talk a bit, because I haven't.
I don't remember exactly, but I think it's subcategory.
Yeah, so they're looking to get the individual weights of each. You're gonna need a couple different size scales because this is not gonna tell you how much a straw is your weigh, or even your styrofoam's gonna weigh. So it might be beneficial to go through, get back together as a group and go through that. You know what I mean, line by line specific.
You want everybody to get the exact same equipment.
Yeah. So you want everybody to use the same thing. And 2, we recognize a project plan it's always modifying your project plan. So if it's just too much for your team to handle, then we can break it down and do all right, we're only going to weigh a glass, this, that, and the major categories. Because mostly for us, the counts and the branding is the biggest thing for us.
What story are you trying to tell with those separate weights?
Well, our idea is that we can focus in and say water bottles are this much, this percentage of it. But that also could be like, yeah, well, we also could kind of extrapolate to that based on the count, get a percentage of, and then just do like a percentage of the total weight. So that's doable too.
We'll go back through and reread it.
Yeah, but that would be a really solid roundtable for
Yeah,
y'all once you get like 60 days in to be like, this is not working, this is working, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and I think Dawn was the one who coined it and said the project is always evolving.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we have a project plan that we start with, but it might not work, you know. This is kind of a pilot project that we're all figuring it out together. But that being said, I do just want to let all y'all know that we are asking the individual organizations to enter the data and QA the data in-house. And we don't want the volunteers entering the data. Like that would be like the project managers.
They would submit it to us, and then we would. You're saying entering it to you.
Hey Sam.
Yeah. So like y'all
Sorry.
enter the data and then QA it and then send it to us and then we QA it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm talking big picture
When you're
data.
talking QA it, what are you meaning by that? For like they're doing the. Okay, so in this case, Kelly is collecting. Kelly is in-house, so she's also going to assess and then report the data to us, and then we send it to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you just want to make sure to look over the data and make sure that, you know, just you always want second eyes on any data that is entered. And then we are in the process of developing an online portal where you can actually enter the data directly. So that will be a lot easier and we'll skip any like data entering step. That will still need to be QA'd. But all y'all will have access to all of that information. Basically, when you submit it for QA, the person who's supposed to be QAing it gets a notification via email, and then you just log in and you go into it. That'll be on Water Atlas, their website, so you'll have your own username associated with that Water Atlas. And that makes it easier for everybody to be able to work in the same portal. We all have access to that information, and then it also visualizes it on a Water Atlas website. So more information on all of that